So part two of Ferrania P33. So I processed all the film today. In my JOBO, I ran the Diafine at 3.5 minutes A, 3.5 minutes B, 70 degrees Fahrenheit. All the other film tests were done using your standard, metal processing tanks. The Rodinal was 1 to 25 for 5 minutes, very slow foreign versions. The DF96 was at 75 degrees Fahrenheit using the standard normal processing as outlined by CineStill. The DDX 1 to 9 was a stand development for 35 minutes. And the other formulation, which was mine, which is a combination of HC110 dilution G and a little bit of Rodinal together, was processed for 35 minutes. So now let's take a look at the negatives. What I've done is I've laid everything out to where you can see all the different negatives, and it's easy to sort of figure out what the exposure latitude would be for materials in terms of over and under exposure. But I went through and I chose the box speed for each of the different settings, and I scanned that on the Imacon. So let's take a look at how those look right now. All right, so let's start out by looking at this first image. This is once again the Ferrania P33 processed in Rodinal 1 to 25. And 1 to 25 Rodinal is a really deep developer. A few important things to know about Rodinal right away. Rodinal does not like to really be processed warm. It really likes to be processed at 68 degrees Fahrenheit. Going up into the 70s, you're absolutely going to increase contrast and increase grain. So you'd be better to err on the side of 67, 68, as opposed to 69 or 70. So really be careful with your temperature if you're going for just the best possible results. Additionally, with Rodinal, agitation really matters. And I would say with all the Ferrania films, the type of agitation you do really matters. If you look at their own literature, Ferrania almost everywhere is talking about gentle inversions, 4 inversions per minute. Really being careful not to agitate too much, because obviously they're trying to control the contrast of the material. Now, when I look at this image, this was exposed at box speed. I think it's absolutely gorgeous. The tonality is beautiful. The shadows are great. The highlights are well controlled. It's incredibly sharp. It has that classic Rodinal feel to it. In terms of exposure latitude, I would say that this particular film, maybe down to 200, 225, somewhere in there, 250, that's about the end in terms of shadow detail. From an overexposure standpoint, you're safe down to 100. You would be fine. So that's basically your exposure latitude. If I was worried about losing shadows, I might shoot this film maybe at 125. However, an important thing to remember is what's the look of the film that you're going for. And I think that all three Ferrania offerings have a very distinctive look to them. And so when I'm doing tests of their film, I'm thinking about how that developer film combination comes together. Most examples that you see of Ferrania's work, it doesn't matter which film you're working on, has, a really cinematic quality to it. Almost crushed or crushed blacks, beautiful mid-tone contrast with pop. It's a very opinionated film. So when I'm working with this film, I'm always trying to find a developer that gives me that look. And I think that Rodinal with this particular film is a really great combination. But again, I would be very mindful of your shadows. I mean, a lot of people out there will be just fine letting their shadows fall and crush, and sometimes I am as well. But just realize that if you shoot the film at 160 and you process it in Rodinal, those shadows don't have a lot of forgiveness. But overall, I think it's absolutely beautiful. All right, so the next film developer combination, once again, Ferrania P33, this time processed in DF96 by CineStill. It's a Monobath developer. It's a really wonderful developer. I've written about it extensively here on Visual Revolution. And it's a great developer for someone who's just first getting into film photography because it's literally a single chemistry to process your film. So once again, the image you're looking at right now is at box speed 160. And what I found with the DF96 was that it didn't quite hit box speed. It's somewhere between 125 and 160, or maybe a low 125. I felt that the shadows were dropping just a little too much, especially compared to Rodinal, which were just a little bit more open and a little more information in the shadows. But overall, I think it's a really beautiful look. The highlights are very well contained. The midtones are absolutely beautiful. The grain is a little bit more evident to my eye. The sharpness is very good. The biggest thing I would just say with this particular film developer combination is I wouldn't shoot it at 160. I'd probably shoot it at 125 just to be safe. Or if I shot it at 160, I would shoot it at 160 understanding that I should probably place my shadow value not at zone 3, but at zone 4 or zone 3.5, just to make sure that was there. The only other thing I noticed with DF96 was that at the end of the 4 minutes, which should be full development and fix, the image needed, or the negatives needed, a little bit longer of agitation to completely fix. Now this is not uncommon. This happened with some of the burger films where literally you had to double the amount of time in DF96 to get a fully fixed negative. I don't think it's that drastic. Maybe another minute. And remember, the way a Monobath developer works, the developer's happening at first, and by the time you're around minute 3-ish or so, there's no development going on. So if you wanted to go out for 4 minutes or 5 minutes, it's fine. That's just fixer. So I did find that I had to extend it by about a minute or a minute and a half. Once again, this was at the 75 degrees Fahrenheit in order for the negative to be completely fixed. I think it's a really great film developer combination. I think I like Rodinal better. I do like Rodinal better, but it's definitely still got a really beautiful, really classic vintage look. The next developer is DDX 1:9 as a stand development, and as you can very quickly see, it is way overdeveloped, and you should have seen that on the negative sheet when it was on the light table. You know, it's just wicked, too much density, too much processing. So this was done once again 1:9 at 35 minutes. If I was interested in running this particular test again, which I'm not sure I am, but if I was interested in running this test again, I would probably go somewhere around 30 minutes, 28 minutes. That would probably be better. But all of the negatives were just way too much contrast, way too much density. So if you remember from previous videos when I did an article on DDX 1:9 for stand, it was between 30 minutes and 60 minutes. This was 35. So obviously that's too much. So I would, once again, probably say 28 minutes to 30 minutes would be closer, but you would have to test if you want to see this developer film combination be successful. All right, our next developer is one that I invented. It's a combination of HC110 and Rodinal, both at very dilute concentrations, and it's a stand development. So the particular formula works anywhere between 30 minutes for box speed and out to about 60 minutes for a push at 68 degrees Fahrenheit. You do have to do a pre-wet. The two stand developments, this one and the DDX, which were the previous post, those both have a 3 to 5 minute pre-wet. It's just really important, in my opinion, with stand development to do that. And as you can see, it has really beautiful tonality, really fine grain, great contrast control, amazing sharpness. You know, it's all there. What I like about this particular developer that I tweaked and invented is that it gives you the ability of really controlling the contrast in a really very finesse sort of way. This is what I would consider my normal contrast development. It is possible to pull this back even a little more by changing the relationship between the HC110 and the Rodinal and emphasizing the HC110 just a little bit more. Another nice part about this particular developer combination is that Rodinal and HC110 both have very long shelf lives, and you use only just a little tiny bit to process the film. But overall, I think this is a really successful film developer combination once again. The interesting part is if I were to shoot this film developer combination again, I would probably rate the film at 200. There's definitely a speed boost with this particular developer. I've seen it every single time I use it. And you could easily, safely rate this film at 200, 225. You'd be just fine. So you pick up a little bit of extra speed. From an overexposure standpoint, down to 100 is okay. And for an underexposure standpoint, probably out to 320 would be okay. So it has a larger usable exposure index compared to other developers that we've already discussed. And once again, I think it still has that classic feel. All right, and the last developer film combination we're going to look at is Diafine. And I love Diafine Developer. Ever since I was asked to write an article with Sandy King many years ago for View Camera Magazine, this has been an absolute bread and butter developer for me. I like it for the hybrid workflow. I didn't really care for it for the wet darkroom, just to be clear. If you're making silver prints, I think there's better developers. If you're scanning film, Diafine's kind of hard to say no to. And once again, I've written extensive articles here on Visual Revolution 2.0 and 1.0 on Diafine if you want to have more information. So if we look at this, much like my previous image, which was my combination of HC110 and Rodinal, this particular image had the benefit of a little bit of a speed boost. So I would also consider this film being shot at 200, 225 would be safe. I think the exposure latitude absolutely goes down to say 320, and you're safe probably out to 100 as well. The highlights are really well controlled. The grain is absolutely beautiful, and the overall gray tonality is, to me, just spot on. So now that you've had a chance to look at the 100% detail crops that I did in Photoshop, as opposed to like me zooming in and out in the video editing software, I think it becomes really clear that the top 3 developers with this film from the 5 that I tested would be Rodinal 1-25, the Diafine, or my combination of Rodinal HC110. Those 3 just stood above everything else. That's not to say the DDX couldn't get better if we decreased it. That's not to say that there's probably not different ways to run the DF96, but those 3 are just so good right out the door. And I really feel that the Rodinal is a great developer with this family of film, and they are more related than they're not, and I'll get into that in my conclusion in a few days. And I think that the Rodinal 1-25, if you're looking for that classic look, it's hard to say no to. However, Diafine is really easy to work with. It's cost effective. It's available again now, lasts freaking forever. And it's a hard one to say no to because you get a speed boost. You get like a legitimate speed boost, which is always important. Who doesn't want a faster film? So Diafine to me is really high up at the top. And so is, once again, that HC110 Rodinal mix. But I understand that's a little more complicated. So tell me what developer film combination you like the best. Over the next day, I'm going to be out photographing the remainder of the film that I have with the 5 cameras that I mentioned in video 1. And I will then use that developer to process all of the rest of the film. Thank you very much for listening. I can't wait to hear your thoughts. Now go shoot some film.